Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. Welcome back to chapter 5. Our topic here is the epidermis. And remember, we've already said that it's the outermost layer of the cutaneous membrane, which is our fancy name for our skin. We've talked about it as being composed of stratified, squamous, epithelial tissue. And remember, when we talked about stratified squamous epithelial tissue in lab, we said its big job is protection. So this is that barrier that's really creating that physical barrier to prevent pathogens and chemicals from invading into our body, as well as preventing a lot of water loss. Now, when we talk about the cells of the epidermis, we're going to be talking about these as keratinocytes, where that CYTE ending means cell, and keratinocyte then would translate to keratin producing cells. And so these are the cells that make the protein keratin, which makes the cells hard and water resistant. We'll see that water does cross the skin, does cross the cutaneous membrane all the time. We have both sweating, which we're aware of, and then we have what's called insensible perspiration, meaning outside of our sensory awareness. And so it's not really accurate to say the cutaneous membrane is waterproof because some water will cross, but it's going to be reduced in part because of the keratin in these keratinocytes. We can also describe the epidermis as avascular, where that prefix A means without, and so this means no blood vessels. And so what we'll see is that the epidermis is supported by the dermis, and as the cells get pushed further and further away from the dermis, they're pushed further and further away from their blood supply. And as a result of that, you will see the cells will die as they move to the outer surface. Now, when we talk about the epidermis as being stratified, it's highly layered. And the amount of layering does vary across the body. We do have what is referred to as thick skin. And this is actually the palm of your hands and the soles of your feet. And this is going to have 5 layers. Whereas the thin skin then is located everywhere else around the body, and the thin skin is going to have 4 layers. Okay. When we talk about these layers, we're actually going to name and describe each one of them. So let's start at the bottom with our innermost layer, and then let's list to the outermost layer. And so we're just going to list them out here, and then we'll describe them in just a few minutes. So each layer is referred to as stratum, which is a way of saying layered. So strata are layers. Stratum basale is the innermost bottom layer. And then we have stratum spinosum. We have stratum granulosum. We have stratum lucidum. Checking my spelling each time. And our outermost layer is the stratum corneum. And notice then that the stratum lucidum is that 5th layer that's found only in the thick skin. So everywhere else you have stratum basale, spinosum, granulosum, and corneum. So you can use this memory device. Bugs spin Granny Lucy's corn. To have you remember, starting with the innermost, that the layers go Stratum Basale, Spinosum, Granulosum, Lucidum, and Corneum. Before we go further, let me just say I know how to spell spin, and, and I see that big typo right there. So let me go ahead and fix that. Okay, next we're going to try to draw out for ourselves a little bit about the epidermis and go through each of these layers in more detail. Okay, so first thing we want to do is to make sure that we've illustrated our dermis. And our dermis, remember, is the innermost layer of the skin. And what we'll see is it has these projections that stick up, which are described as dermal papillae. Papilla would be singular, papillae with an AE ending is plural. So here I've just, at the bottom of my picture, I've drawn sort of a squiggly line. Now immediately on top of that squiggly line, I'm ready to start layering in my epidermis. So I'm going to represent the entire rest of this screen as my epidermis. And so the layer of the epidermis that's sitting directly on top of the dermis is called the stratum basale. And so I'm just going to fill that in with some flattened squamous shaped cells all over top of that squiggly line, just to represent stratum basale layer. And so I'm going to go ahead right here and label, and I'm going to abbreviate stratum with an S and then basale. Now the stratum basale layer has three important type of cells. So this first type of cell that I'm drawing in is going to be the basal cell. And the basal cell then is our stem cell. And remember, stem cells are significant because they maintain their ability to do mitosis. And what we'll see then is this layer of cells has to be in place, constantly mitotically dividing, producing new keratinocytes, and then pushing them up to the surface. We will also see, referring to my earlier drawing that I made, we will also see a type of cell. I'm going to make it the same green color. We're going to see another type of cell embedded in this layer called a Merkle cell. And the Merkle cell is going to be a sensory receptor cell. And then the third important type of cell we're going to see is a melanocyte. And your melanocyte, you can draw sort of circular shape with these long extensions, almost kind of like an octopus or a hand sticking up, and then draw little vesicles coming off of those like finger-like extensions. Now, melanocyte is going to be the type of cell that produces melanin, which is going to be important in both skin pigmentation and hair pigmentation. We're going to talk more about the significance and importance of melanin and this cell type, the melanocyte, as we progress in the future. Now, this layer, this stratum basale layer, is of course being named based on the presence of that basal or stem cell. And we'll see there's some variation as to how thick this layer can be. I don't actually have that written down, so I'm going to say like 3 to 4 layers thick. Okay. The next layer that we want to draw in is going to be our stratum spinosum. Stratum spinosum. So I'm just going to grab a different color to help represent that. I'm going to layer here stratum spinosum, and I'm going to go ahead and draw out those layer of cells stacked right on top of the keratinocytes from the stratum basale. So remember, what's happening is as we're producing new cells, the old cells are constantly being pushed up to the top. And so here we're representing stratum spinosum. Now the stratum spinosum is going to vary in its thickness, so it can be about 8 to 10 layers thick. We'll see that the stratum spinosum has both these keratinocytes, and then it has another important type of cell. I'm going to draw it to look sort of like amoeboid in shape. And this type of cell is going to be called a Langerhans cell. And the Langerhans cell is a macrophage. So it is going to be involved in repair, both removing debris and also if any pathogens do get to this point, they're going to be phagocytized by this cell. So this is going to be an important part of that protection. The next layer we want to draw are the keratinocytes. Excuse me. The next layer we want to draw is the Granulosum layer. And so let me just start adding them over top of my previous drawing to show this next layer, Stratum Granulosum. This layer, Stratum Granulosum, is what is happening here. We see that these cells are producing lots of keratin. That's making it hard, and it's drying out the cell. It's creating some water resistance. And then we're producing this other molecule called keratohyalin, which is helping to connect these cells to each other. So if you've ever had a sunburn and your skin's peeled and you can peel like a whole sheet of skin, those cells are sticking together because of the keratohyalin. So what we're going to see happening in the stratum granulosum is that this is the layer when those cells are really dying out because now they're too far away from their blood supply at the dermis, and also they're dying because of this buildup of keratin that's happening. So it's kind of a twofold reason. The next layer is the stratum lucidum. And remember, this layer is found only in thick skin. So that would be palms of your hands and soles of your feet. Sorry about those technical difficulties. So let's draw in our stratum lucidum layer. And in this layer, we get cells that look transparent, which is how it's getting its name, stratum lucidum. And it's full of this lipoprotein called eliodin, which is really causing that transparent appearance. And then the outermost layer for us to look at is the stratum corneum. Stratum corneum. And by the time the cells have pushed either into the lucidum or the corneum, they're dead, they're dry, they're hard packed together. They've got a lot of that keratin to really make them water resistant and hard. They have a lot of that keratohyalin to help connect them together as these nice sheets. And we get this really nice barrier that prevents microbial invasion, prevents dehydration, protects underlying tissues from abrasion, really giving a lot of protection to the underlying tissue. That's our stratum corneum layer. The melanocyte, remember, was producing the melanin, which is packaged in a vesicle, and that goes up through the different layers. We're going to talk more about skin pigmentation as we go through. And that is it for the epidermis. Do make sure you're paying attention to these different cell types that we've mentioned in here. And remember, the cell type of the epidermis is the keratinocyte. Stay tuned to hear more about the dermis, and as always, take care of yourselves and each other.